So in lieu of Mr. Pinckney's presence, he's in his car or in his truck driving over here, he'll be here shortly. But it's all right with everybody. We'll be started with the meeting. I know everybody's number of people are on some tight schedules this afternoon, as usual. So we'll call the meeting to order. And what we typically do, once again, this is a hybrid meeting for us. Appreciate everybody taking the time to come over here in person. And also for those people who are on the Zoom virtually. So we will go around the room as we typically do, so people who on the Zoom will know who's in the room. So we have both some staff and we have some special guests here this afternoon within the topic. So we're just going to go around the room, just use your name and your title and your affiliation. Mike?
I'm Mike Pacuzzi. I'm a senior planner with the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board.
I'm Creative Freeland. I'm the Sustainability Plan for the City of Syracuse within the Division of Planning and Sustainability.
Owen Kearney, City of Syracuse Division of Planning and Sustainability.
Scott Steve, Mayor, City of Cleveland.
Reed Cleveland, County Legislator, Town and Village of Homer, and this guacamole is really good.
Bo Harbor County Legislator. Kip Hicks with Madison County Industrial Development Agency.
And of course, I'm David Botar, Director of the Regional Planning Board.
Bruce Kettler, GIS Analyst with the Planning Board.
Sydney Johnson, Deputy County Executive on Dartmouth County.
Mel Chesbro, Oswego County Legislator and member of the Oswego County IDA.
Troy Loeffner, Onondaga County Department of Planning.
Dave Knapp, Onondaga County Legislator.
Jan Ty, Mayor of Glassline.
Julie Flack, Outreach Representative for Congressman Manning.
Emmanuel Carter, Onondaga County and Emeritus in the ESF.
We have a few staff.
I'm Isabel Wilson, a planner at the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board.
I'm Aaron McKeon, Environmental Program Manager for the Regional Planning Board.
Terry Hollis, Business Manager, Regional Planning Board.
Aaron Otis, Community Campaign Manager at the Regional Planning Board.
Lindsay Spear, Senior Energy Planner and running the Energy Smart CNY program at the Planning Board.
Morgan Spalding, Grant Administrator, Portland County.
Don't fight over it.
I'm Amanda Mazzoni, the Energy Program Manager here at the Planning Board.
Yeah, Portland, Senior Advisor with the Regional Planning Board.
And on the Zoom, I see we have Jenny Haynes from the City of Auburn.
Hi, everybody.
Tim Stahl, County Planning Director. There he is. We have a face to go with the name. And who else do we have on the Zoom?
We've got Patrick Clune, County of Cortland.
I think Pat Clune was there too.
And you've got
There's
Mary Ann
Pat.
Messenger, Madison
From
County.
Mayor of the Village of Homer, correct?
Sorry.
Anybody else on the Zoom besides Mary Ann Messenger from Madison County? Is there anybody else?
No. Else.
And let me just, if the folks on the Zoom, if you could just give a thumbs up, can you see the presentation and can you hear us? Oh, good. Okay, I think we've got the housekeeping out of the way. First formal item on the agenda then would be the approval of the agenda and the minutes from our August 27th meeting. Motion, Scott Steve. Second. Hicks. All in favor?
Aye.
How am I doing? So far, so good. Executive Director's job doesn't work out for me. We have an interesting topic this afternoon. Our speaker will be Amanda Mazzoni, who is Program Manager for our energy program, and she sort of wears dual hats. The energy program, the DEC Climate Smart Communities program. This is a real team effort in the office with a number of staff people working in this program area. So rather than me try to stumble through what Amanda's going to be talking, let me ask her to come to the the podium and do her presentation.
We'll do it this way.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here, and I hope that everybody is willing to speak up during this meeting today. The topic is the New York State Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. And so I am essentially presenting on behalf of the DEC today. This is really a plan that they put together with a lot of input already, but they are looking for input primarily from the perspective of both municipal officials and communities as a whole. So I'm going to give a little bit of background on the project, the planning process, the funding, and then get into a summary of what's in the draft plan so far, and then pause at some points for your input and feedback. So this is this project is funded through the EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. Oh, Bruce, next slide, please. Can you just click?
I gotta hit the clicker for you.
Can you just click?
Yeah, I can just click.
That works too. So it's funded through the EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. This planning initiative was available to all states. It was basically money that the federal government said, there's money for this planning. If you want it, submit an application and you can have it. So New York State, of course, put in their application. They received about $3 million to do this climate action planning process. And there are a couple of steps in the process. They've completed the first step, which is the Priority Climate Action Plan, or the PCAP. They did a number of outreach sessions, got input, and submitted their initial PCAP draft back in March of 2024. And now they are in the Comprehensive Climate Action Planning phase, which is due at the end of this year. So we're just kind of looking for final pieces of feedback, making tweaks on their Comprehensive Climate Action Plan ahead of submitting that to the federal government. And then eventually they will have to create a status report. Just to give you a sense of the differences, the Priority Climate Action Plan was really looking at near-term and really high-impact greenhouse gas emissions reduction measures. So it was really targeted and fairly brief compared to what the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan will be, which is looking at establishing both near-term and longer-term goals in terms of greenhouse gas emissions reductions, as well as providing strategies to achieve those goals. So it's not just the goal setting, but the strategies. And that is, this is all really highly drawing from the state's scoping plan, which the Climate Action Council developed back in 2022 in response to the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. So they kind of did this planning process before, and now they're updating it a couple years later in the context of the requirements of the federal government's planning initiative. Next slide, please. The Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, again, like I said, was open to all states. It was also open to the 67 most populous metropolitan statistical areas. So you can see on the map any of the areas in the yellowish and the greenish are communities that were eligible and submitted an application to receive the funding to do this planning process. So it is fairly nationwide. And then next slide, please, Bruce. Gives you a sense of in New York State where there are parallel planning efforts going on. Unfortunately, Syracuse was not one of the 67 most populous metropolitan statistical areas, so we kind of fall under the umbrella of the whole state's planning process. So the other areas that were eligible and are working on this individually in parallel are the Albany, Buffalo, Rochester, and New York City areas. So you can see them highlighted there. Next slide, Bruce, please. So in terms of the timeline for this project, it really started a couple of years ago, back in 2023, when the state was drafting that priority climate action plan. They did initial outreach and analysis of measures to include in that plan. At the end of 2023, they finalized their PCAP and submitted it by March of 2024. There was implementation funding through the federal government that the state was hoping to tap into. I'm not exactly sure what their project was that they submitted for, but it was not funded. However, because they had the state's PCAP was around, it covered the rest of the state that was in that gray area on the previous map. And so through that planning process, it enabled a project to be awarded through the Hudson Valley Regional Council. Really kind of an interesting project that they're using funds to look at a bunch of different ways to reduce fugitive methane emissions from closed landfills and use those closed landfills for things like installing solar arrays or battery storage systems or native pollinator gardens to try to make closed landfills have a better use than just kind of sitting there, since you can't do a whole lot of other development on them. So that was enabled because of the state's planning process through this climate pollution reduction grant. And now we are at the CCAP area, the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. They've been doing outreach on this through various webinars and meetings and stakeholder engagement sessions. They have a active survey that I will share the link to at the end of the presentation. And so they are in the process, like I said before, finalizing that climate action plan in order to submit it to the federal government by the end of this year. So with that, the point of this meeting is to try to gather some feedback from you all on what's been going on in your communities in terms of some of the actions that the state has in the plan, trying to get a sense of where you might have had successes in implementing projects related to the different sectors that are in the plan, where you might have had barriers or are facing barriers currently. Generally, your thoughts on the kinds of things that the state is putting into their comprehensive climate action plan. So we'll walk through some of those in just a minute. Next slide, please, Bruce. Next slide after that. So the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, like I mentioned before, is really heavily based off of the scoping plan, again, created in response to the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act as a framework for how New York State is going to achieve the goals that are in the Climate Act. And so really, they're kind of taking the information that's in the scoping plan, getting it back out there into the communities, again, trying to get feedback on what's been working or not working so far, and then trying to tweak the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan accordingly. So it's not completely reinventing the wheel, it's trying to take what they created and just kind of update it. Next slide, please. In the scoping plan, the sectors, there's kind of these main sectors that they focus on, and this pie chart shows a bit about the makeup of emissions in New York State across these major sectors. So you can see that buildings and transportation are the state's major emitting sectors. They also have electricity industry, waste and agriculture, and forestry as major sectors highlighted and have related emissions reduction strategies for each of these sectors. Next slide, please. So the scoping plan, the major strategies that are identified in the scoping plan are really reflected in the draft of the comprehensive climate action plan. And so these strategies include energy efficiency and building electrification, zero emission electricity, transportation electrification, enhancing public transit and implementing smart growth, transitioning to low global warming potential refrigerants and enhancing refrigerant management, maximizing carbon sequestration in forests, mitigating methane from waste, agriculture, and energy sectors, and having a diverse portfolio of solutions in the industrial sector. So these will be reflected in some of the discussion moving forward. Next slide, please. The last. So again, I just wanted to recap. Using the scoping plan as the basis, this comprehensive climate action plan is going to reiterate the state's near and long-term emissions reduction targets, identify a range of greenhouse gas emissions across all economic sectors, and assess full benefits for communities while discussing implementation authority and barriers and potential funding strategies and workforce needs. That's the background of the funding and the effort here today. Before we move on to the details, I was hoping we could take a quick break to do a little poll. So if you could take out your phones and scan this QR code, it will take you to a site. This is a little bit of an experiment here, so if you're able to, I appreciate your attempts at participating in the survey.
You folks think regional planning board meetings are no fun.
So there's just a couple of brief questions. If you're able to log in, that it should prompt you. And okay, thanks, Bruce. So once you start answering, Bruce, I think if you press present at the top here in the blue button, it will kind of show the results in live, in real time. So the first question is, in one word, how would you describe the state's scoping plan or what you know about the state's climate goals? So I see some people have started answering, and you'll start to see this word cloud emerging.
Oh, that's pretty slick.
So it's I think I'm not surprised to see some of these things coming up here already.
Hey, folks, if I can do it, I know you can do it.
Is there a Wi-Fi?
Mine won't be that
The Wi-Fi,
Can't get it.
the Wi-Fi password, do we have that written down somewhere we can hand to people?
Yeah.
I thought we had some cards.
I don't know.
It is, I know what it is, but it's really difficult to describe. Bruce is writing it down.
Is it the one?
I just
It's
want to make sure I have it right.
100 Clinton, yeah. And it's,
So it's not CNY?
oh, no, you're right.
Yeah.
It is the CNY Regional Planning Development Board. The password is a version of 100 Clinton SYR, but there's zeros and ones.
It's 100, capital C, lowercase l, the number 1, lowercase n, lowercase t, 0,
Yeah, here.
lowercase n,
Exactly. And you said your
n as in Nancy, and then capital S, and then a lowercase y and a lowercase r.
Thank you. I knew we had those.
This is Fort Knox. Unauthorized.
Oh, yeah. Like, somebody else did a little call for the Wi-Fi.
It's, mine just is delayed.
Okay.
No funny.
Well, thanks for getting in there. The next question should pop right up. I'm seeing right away, though, there's a big takeaway that it grows bigger with the more people who put the same word. So ambitious, is what we're seeing as a result here, and followed by creative, so that's interesting. You can keep filling that out if you haven't yet, but Bruce, could you just move to the next slide, please? And it'll have the next question, which is, oh, let's see. I think there's an arrow at the bottom.
Yeah, I'm
left
trying to get there. Yeah, I gotta get rid of this thing, it's in my way.
You have the QR code someplace else. Thanks. It went away.
There we go. Next slide, there we go.
Yep, so the next question is, which area, so which sector basically, have you had the most success with in terms of implementing projects or policies that would reduce emissions in your community? So looking at the big sectors that the state is focusing on, where have you had the most successes in kind of energy reduction or emissions reduction projects? Buildings, transportation, electricity, renewable energy, industry, waste, and agriculture, forestry. Right. So there's a little bit of a mix coming through here with buildings so far, seemingly as the sector with the most successes, and not very many successes with industry or transportation or agriculture. All right. Next slide, Bruce. The next one is similar, but which area have you had the most barriers with in terms of implementing projects or policies to reduce emissions in your community? Probably not with this, but all right, so this makes sense based on the results of the last, but yeah, it seemed like, I think it was transportation that was showing up as the area with the most barriers. And then the last one, what resources, this is kind of short answer, so just you can, write something and post it, and I think you should be able to write a second thing if you have two things to say, or more. But what resources would be the most helpful in overcoming the barriers in order to complete the projects or policies to reduce emissions? Funding, money, funding. Yeah, I'm surprised by those. Technical assistance, funding. Additional funding. There's definitely a theme here, so it'll be good to send this along to the state. I'm sure they're somewhat aware, but hearing it over and over is only going to make it more clear. Okay. All right, you can keep filling this out if you haven't finished, or if you have other thoughts.
Do we get like a prize?
A prize. I mean, the prize is just knowing that this is going to be sent along to the state. There are cookies, yes. You can take a cookie break anytime. All right. Bruce, when you get a chance, could you just move it back to the PowerPoint, please? All right, so I appreciate all of your playing along and feedback through that poll. Let me see if this is going to work. It may not. When you connect. All right, so we're going to shift to talking about these sectors in that are in the plan, and give a little bit of a sense of what the recommendations are that the state is leaning towards at this point. There's a lot in the plans, so I would encourage everybody to review the scoping plan when you have a chance. The CCAP is not available to review yet, but will be once it's final. The PCAP PCAP is posted online. I think there is a link, or at least in the information we sent out, there was a link to that priority climate action plan. Still not doing it.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. So I was trying to incorporate the polling into the slides, and then the Microsoft servers were down, so that wasn't working. Here we go. All right, so first up is the building sector. I'm going to just talk through a couple of sectors and then pause to get some input. There's a lot on this slide. It reflects that there's strategy themes, recommended strategy themes related to each of the sectors, and then highlights. So there's, a theme of like a type of emissions reduction action, and then the highlights are like each individual emission reduction action that the state has within the plan. I'm going to read through the strategy themes. The highlights are up there just to kind of get you thinking a little bit. If you want to kind of just review those as I'm talking about the strategy themes, but on the building side, the recommended strategy themes are to adopt zero emission codes and standards and require energy benchmarking for buildings, scale up public financial incentives and expand access to public and private low-cost financing for building decarbonization, expand New York's commitment to market development, innovation, and leading by example in state projects, and transition from hydrofluorocarbons. So I think you can see in there already they've mentioned the scaling up of financial incentives. So already your feedback has been taken into account at least a little bit. But with that, just keep, as I move on to the next sector, which is electricity, so kind of related to buildings, think about the types of projects or policies that you were maybe thinking about when you were filling out that poll a few minutes ago, so that when we pause for some input, you can kind of mention the projects, the building projects that you've seen in your communities that have been successful or maybe had some barriers. On the electricity, in the electricity sector, the recommended strategy themes are to transform power generation, enhance the grid, and invest in new technology. So a lot of this has to do with the transition to renewable energies in various forms. And then finally, the industry sector. The strategy highlights that the state has in their scoping plan is to support workforce development, incentivize procurement of low carbon products, and establish greenhouse gas registry and reporting system. So with all of those kind of built environment type sectors in mind, there's some guiding questions here. We don't have to directly answer these, but again, just to kind of get you thinking, like what were some of the successes that you had in your community in implementing some of these actions in some of these sectors? Why do you think they were successful? What were the challenges? What advice might you give to other communities working through similar projects? And what additional resources would help support buildings, the buildings, electricity, and industry sectors? So we got a little bit of that through the poll, but now I want to just pause and hear from all of you on some kind of more specific examples.
Are you worried about the natural producing gas, methane, nitrous oxide, that type of thing, that comes from things such as wetlands?
Yeah, so those are included in the plan. There is a section on waste and agriculture and forestry. Now, I don't know if it doesn't seem like there is a plan for reducing methane emissions from wetlands in the plan that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly, that kind of emissions from sources that are not like directly burning of fuel, those are being incorporated into the plan in certain sectors. So are there any like specific building emissions reduction, efficiency projects, renewable energy projects.
I'll just speak to the City of Syracuse's LED streetlight conversion and other LED conversions in the buildings and facilities. Because I would say it touches to the first point of what some of the successes is. It was primarily pitched as a monetary opportunity, so a way to save money and just build building efficiency. And I think that also ties into some of the challenges in implementing some of these emission reduction projects is that if you come with only the mindset of emission reduction when there's a lot of fires going on for a municipality or an organization, it's difficult to prioritize doing good. But if you can tie it to doing well and doing good, it can become quite effective.
This is just related to buildings?
Buildings, the three sectors that we just went through, buildings, industry, and electricity. Yeah. So renewable electricity, yeah, Jan, go ahead.
Well, we put heat pumps in our municipal buildings 3 years ago, and mainly because our air conditioning went out, and we were able to put heat pumps in for a little more than what an engineering company was going to charge us to see if our roof would hold the air conditioners that they wanted to put in. So the heat pumps were a win-win.
Okay.
We have a comment from Jeannie Gleisner. Would you like me to read it?
Sure.
She says, as a community member, I've been using an electric lawnmower for my 3 acres of lawn for over 10 years, and I would not go back to gas. Battery power is so much easier and better for our environment. But CO2 emissions from lawn equipment in New York State totaled over 1.3 million tons in 2020. See if I can expand this a little bit. There we go. New York State ranks 4th in the nation for highest of these emissions. Is there a strategy to encourage the transition from fossil-fueled equipment to battery-fueled equipment?
That's a very good question. I think generally, yes. Definitely yes when it comes to transportation. I'm not positive if that is included, which sector that is included in, though, for like lawn equipment. I know it is something that the state is interested in, and we have has funded through other programs like the Clean Energy Communities program, and incentivizes through that program as well. So I don't know exactly where it fits into this plan. I'm trying to see if it might be in somehow incorporated into a different sector, but I'm not exactly sure where it fits in. I guess I'll just say, but I know generally it is something that the state has been supporting. So I would have to dig a little bit deeper into all of the 95 actions that are included to see where, if that specific one on the lawn equipment is included and where.
Okay, we have another comment from Pat Clune. What is the life cycle for battery-powered equipment? How are these recycled? What is the cradle-to-grave plan for this technology to include solar panels?
So I think the life cycle depends on the battery-powered equipment. I think for a passenger electric vehicle, for example, it's like they typically have a warranty of 8 years, 100,000 miles to cover the battery. For smaller pieces of equipment like lawnmowers or trimmers or that kind of small leaf blowers, I don't know if there's an estimated. There must be an estimated life. I am not familiar with it off the top of my head. But in terms of recycling, it does seem like there is a market for. I'm seeing the cradle to grave for this and solar panels. There's a market an emerging market, I will say, for recycled batteries. and solar panels. And also for things like solar panels, they typically have a warranty that they'll produce, 80% or X% of their original output by year 2020 or 25, depending on the model of the solar panel. But they're still producing energy at that point, so they can still be used well beyond the warranty period, and that could be, true for some battery-powered pieces of equipment as well. I think it really just kind of depends on the equipment, how long they can actually be used for. This is really getting into the nitty-gritty of stuff that I was not really prepared to answer off the top of my head today.
Let me jump in a second.
Yeah.
And typical of the state when they're putting together a plan, and something we wrestle with, I think, even at the local level, if you're doing a comprehensive plan, sort of pretty high level, pretty abstract, pretty vague, is sort of the general approach. But I think if we push that aside, and if we want to think for a second, and I often talk about this to staff, so they've heard this spiel, but we have had a lot of successes in this region, and I think already those successes are being forgotten or overlooked. So if we think of landfills, we, the Regional Planning Board, this board, we've worked with a number of communities to take closed landfills and put fairly large solar farms on those landfills. So, that's an example. There's a number of communities, and I think I couldn't hear all your comments, but a number of municipalities are taking existing buildings, and if you really go way back in time, and if Jenny Haynes is still on our Zoom, the city of Auburn probably led the region's effort, and I'm going back 20 years ago, maybe longer, geothermal heating, cooling for the city of Auburn's municipal building in downtown Auburn. So that was the original Mayor Lattimore in the city of Auburn. So I'm back in holy smokes, Jimmy Carter days. Right, so this is, you gotta be kind of gray to get that far back in time. But as a community, the city of Auburn and as a region, took on a project way back then that I believe is still functioning for the municipal building. Fast forward to today, there's been a number of energy heat pumps. There was a nice little education session with the town of Pompey, if I have this right, Isabel?
Yes.
Where they put in a heat pump. There was a project down in Cortland with the town of what? Town of Preble. Right, where they did a heat pump. There are a number of developers here in Syracuse that I know have gone with geothermal wells. And Owen, these are some projects in the city of Syracuse and Syracuse Lakefront, right here and across the street, practically kitty corner. So we have been, as a community and as a region, kind of picking away at this. And so there are some successes, quite a few successes. To that question about what would you advise communities to do, I'm always willing to offer advice if people are willing to listen to me. But I think you got to look for examples of successful projects. And my experience is working with municipal officials. We can talk high level, abstract, and sort of this kind of forum, but there's nothing better than if we can point to a project and bring in a village mayor or a town supervisor, and they can talk specifically to the benefit of that project in their community. So I think that's the connection that we have to keep making over and over and over again, and the state needs to do it. They have the resources. They put out one press release, and then they move on, but you need press releases all the time.
So to that end, we'd love to get your all's technical assistance with Portland County, because right now we are looking at 3 projects at our 100-year-old courthouse either keeping gas-powered boilers at $12 million, going to the air energy efficient exchangers at $12.5 million, or going to geothermal for $15 to $16 million. We have a grant of $2.2 million, and then the rest of the county's going to have to figure out where to come from. So we'd love to, get Central New York's technical expertise as to, are there other grant funding streams available to help cover some of these costs, and what would be the best long-term, return on the value. But we've looked at all three, alternatives. We don't want to do gas, but at $12 million, it's a big number for a 100-year-old courthouse.
Last year, the CFA funding round, there was significant funding for buildings that were going full decarbonization.
So I've been in contact with Erica, and she's been helping me with this as well.
But Dave, to go off to an example that we did that maybe would help other municipalities, I don't know how many other has a generator in their methane, from the methane from the wastewater treatment plant. That was another one that was snuck in there as a great success. We're talking $70,000 a month savings with that project, and we're, fixing some of the bugs that were, because it was all new technology when we started, but, I'm proud to say that actually for the last month it's been running continuously, so, which has not been the case all along. So,
Another
pretty, that's a good example.
And I'm just fixated on this point because I'm always, so quickly these things get forgotten. We were able to do them, and that's part of the challenge. Can you do it? Well, yes, you can do it, and municipalities or developers or businesses are doing it. And we've got to keep track of those successes.
Something that I would very much like to see it on, I'll give a brief concrete example. I'm meeting with a farmer this coming weekend. She wants to show me the surrounding solar fields near her farm. She won't use the term solar farm because it's quite offensive. And that is because there is a lot of perception feeling out there that there are significant safety concerns with the solar panels that are installed near farmland. So I'm wondering what is in the scope plan right now or is going to be added that guarantees in some way that there is testing, that there is reassurances from the state that any solar panels that are installed near productive farmland, near animals, is safe.
Yeah, it's a good question. And really, from my experience, this tends to fall on the developer, right? So the developer in their land use agreements will always have a decommissioning plan. And they typically have to have a bond for that plan right up front so that we know they have the funding to fix the land when the project ends or at the end of the useful life of the project, whatever the term the land use agreement is. So we actually just a couple weeks ago took a tour of the landfill solar project in the town of Manlius, and the developer was there kind of explaining to us, this is always something that's built in, it's always a question that gets asked. They can provide the information that there's no harmful chemicals, it doesn't bleach anything into the ground. Basically they put posts in, and at the end of the project, they take the posts out. So from their perspective, that's really, sometimes they'll have to put seeding down to fill the holes. But typically there isn't a whole lot of destruction of the land because of the solar farm, and it's a fairly seemingly quick and easy process to decommission them and return the land to pretty much how they found it. So, yeah.
No, and then another point, on that regard, a lot of farmers are actually turning to using agrivoltaics, so a combination of agriculture and solar panels, oftentimes, particularly for struggling farms, it can provide a lifeline to them to allow the farm to still remain productive and be able to make a profit and earn a living for the farmer. Whereas if they didn't do that, then they might have to sell off their farm, subdivide it to a property developer or some other alternative that would no longer make that land productive. So there's kind of creative solutions out there for not just people that want to develop solar panels on their sites, but even for farmers that maybe want to do cogeneration with agriculture as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, I think the first thing that might come to some people's mind is like cheap grazing. At least that's the first that I learned about in terms of agrivoltaics. But I've also seen where they're actually growing like crops under the solar panels, and it can be beneficial with the shading from the panels for certain crops at certain points of day. So it is, safe enough to grow crops to eat underneath the panels. So, or safe enough for the sheep to be grazing under the panels. So, like Mike said, there are some creative ways to sometimes do both. It might not be the exact type of farming that's done on the rest of the farm, but we are, hearing from communities that some farmers are really not wanting to, but needing to turn to solar as a way to make their farm, the rest of their farm, financially be able to survive. So I don't know to what extent the state has those kinds of requirements built in, but it is kind of standard practice in the land agreements with the developers at this point.
Okay, thank you.
So I didn't see anything on the slides, but in what ways is the state addressing urban heat island issues through urban forestry and related approaches?
It's a good question.
Is there money for that? Are there concepts about that the state's developing?
Yeah, so forestry and maybe what would be helpful is if I just talk through the remaining sectors very briefly and then just open up for feedback on any topic. But there is a sector, it's agriculture and forestry, not so much urban forestry, but I think generally that chapter does talk about tree planting in various areas and soil health and that kind of discussion. In terms of heat island effects, I don't think that any of these actions, so the focus of the climate action plan is really to reduce emissions and the mitigation efforts. So in that sense, there may be indirect benefits, co-benefits of reducing emissions also reduces heat island effects. But from what I have read, I haven't seen a specific section on urban heat island and the specific actions related just to that.
So I also think that urban forestry also reduces absorbs the emissions.
Yes, carbon sequestration through forestry in general is in the plan, but whether it's specific to urban forestry.
It's where most of the emissions are.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so but I'm not sure that they specifically call out urban forestry, but forestry, generally speaking, is part of the plan. I'd have to dig a little deeper. Yes.
Manuel, are you familiar with New York State's Extreme Heat Action Plan?
No, I'm not.
I think this would probably fall under that. They've went through an extensive process of looking at adaptation and mitigation strategies for extreme heat. So I'm pretty sure that urban forestry was part of that discussion.
Yes, thanks, Leslie. That's a good point. I'm going to just move quickly to pull up the information about the other sectors and then open it up for any thoughts on these sectors. So transportation we haven't really talked about yet. The recommended strategy themes are transitioning to zero emission vehicles and equipment. I guess this is where it falls in. Zero emissions vehicles and equipment. That's where the lawn equipment that Jean was mentioning probably falls in. Enhancing public transportation and mobility alternatives. promoting smart growth and mobility-oriented development, and facilitate market-based solutions and financing. So a lot of this is related to zero emissions vehicles and transit type projects. And then going to the next sector, waste. The reduction or the recommended strategy themes are, of course, to reduce, reuse, recycle waste, monitor, detect, and reduce fugitive emissions. So this is kind of where the methane emissions comes from, where you're not actually burning anything. It's just being released through a natural process. And then establishing markets for recovered resources and biogas utilization. And then agriculture and forestry, the recommended strategy themes are to promote sustainable forest management, advanced livestock management strategies, and improve soil health, nutrient management, and agroforestry. So opening it up to thoughts on, successes or challenges in those sectors. Specific projects that have.
So one example from Cortland on the previous slide for the reductions with the waste. Cortland Reuse and SUNY Cortland were just awarded an award from the New York State Association of Reduction, Reuse, and Recycling for their efforts to divert college dorm waste at the end of the school year into Cortland Reuse, which then allows them to sell that at low cost to individuals in the community and divert all that stuff that would normally go to the landfill at the end of every school year. It's a great nonprofit. I know Tompkins has a very similar organization, and it's all community run. And it's a great example of diverting a lot of material that would otherwise go to our landfills and reuse them in different ways. So just a local example there.
Cool, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I'm curious to hear about any feedback, from any of those sectors, but transportation seems to be, it's one of our largest emitting sectors, and it also seems to be, thinking back to the survey questions from the beginning, it was kind of in the middle in terms of having more successes or barriers to implementing those types of projects. So, I'm curious to hear what types of transportation projects related to zero emission vehicles, so electric vehicles, charging stations, transit, smart growth, what has been kind of going on in your communities that's either worked or really not worked that you could have used some?
So we negotiated a deal. We put a solar farm in next to our school district to get a charging station in for buses. And of course, we see where some of those issues are with the electric vehicles and the buses, because I think a lot of us in this area are National Grid, and National Grid has spent the last decade reducing their power line because of LED lights, which did what it needed to do, reducing what they have in the streets and their voltage, and now with electric vehicles is becoming a challenge for them to catch up and get the amperage that's needed at the end of these dead-end streets to, if everybody has a charging station. So I think, they did back off to the new dealers to sell a certain amount of vehicles a year, car dealers to sell a certain amount of vehicles per year, because it just wasn't buying off. People didn't want to have that infrastructure investment in their own home to do that. And it's the same with going from gas to electric in their home. That's a big hurdle. And again, that goes back to that word funding, I think was the key. And I don't know, those are barriers. It's hard enough for people to replace what they have, and then to change the infrastructure going into it makes it difficult.
Right, yeah.
I can speak to two things on the transportation side. So it's opposite ends, but so Syracuse Metropolitan Transportation Council, SMTC, we staff They did two major studies, one for bus rapid transit in the city of Syracuse, which I believe Centro, and the bus transit company in Syracuse and Central New York is moving forward on the bus rapid transit would be 2 corridors, James Street, and I forget the other corridor, there's a second corridor.
James Street, South Ave, out to OCC, and then University Hill out to Onondaga Lake, the mall, the regional transportation center. Yeah.
So the idea of bus rapid transit, it's been tried successfully in a number of other communities, certainly in the Schenectady areas, I think the closest example. So this is where, a planning effort, working with the city, working with the county, and working with Centro, we're able to flesh out the idea and able to justify the investment that will be required. And the whole idea of bus rapid transit is you will increase ridership because it's more frequent bus service. They don't have to stop at every street corner or however it works, but it's more efficient. The opposite is we were asked really by the county to take a look at public transit along Route 31 where Micron is. And a very qualified consultant team was hired, and they're almost done with sort of the planning process. But they took a look at is what level of public transit could you have along that corridor going forward from just regular bus service that you might have now, but to bus rapid transit, and as far as light rail. And what was interesting, so the consultant team has been interacting directly with the towns along that corridor. So the town of Cicero, town of Clay, town of Lyceum, I think the town of Van Buren. And we got as far as really getting into presenting some really great visualizations of what a modern bus rapid transit or light rail system would look like along the corridor. But to have the enhanced transit, the point had to be made to the towns, you got to increase the density of development along the corridor, because that's how public transit works. The denser the development, the more riders. And help me, Aaron, if I get too far afield with this. But the response back from the towns is, well, the residents don't want denser development. They don't want to be a city. And so it's sort of like an interesting test case of how do you get from the high level idea and the stuff that's in the state's plan to actually trying to implement it. And this consultant team, the visuals they've put together are really very informative, very impressive. From my perspective, looks very exciting, would be very dynamic. But if you're talking about, mid-rise apartment buildings, townhouses along Route 31, mixed-use, dense developments, basically your response from the towns is, yeah, we're not interested in that. So it's challenging to try, particularly in the transportation area, because clearly transit would be the biggest thing you could do to reduce car trips and all of that. So it's an interesting experience we've seen over literally the last 2 years in this community.
So in the village of Pulaski, the municipality put in the first car chargers. But since then, the car dealerships have put in a slew of them. When the medical center added on an addition, they made that part of their project. And Aldi's has just put in 4 new car chargers. So slowly but surely they're multiplying.
Yeah, and so I think, not everywhere is going to move towards more denser development to enable transit. So I think that's where the transition to lower emission vehicles kind of comes in. So that fits for the last kind of area.
So, David, question for you, David. With the bus rapid transit, thinking about Route 31, would it not make sense to explore stations in existing villages where the density already is?
Yeah, the problem, I
Building
mean, the
new
specific
low
village,
density communities.
the village of Baldwinsville. What the mayor of the village of Baldwinsville says, we're so densely developed, we couldn't accommodate the bus rapid transit stations within our community, was basically his response. So, you know, I mean, we're all familiar, I certainly am, when you get into downtown Baldwinsville, I mean, it's pretty dense, and so how would you put in, you know, a bus rapid transit station? But they certainly are, they've looked at that and as part of it. But you would need more density than just, because along that corridor, besides the village of Baldwinsville for density, what do you got? You got Baldwinsville, you got Radisson, and you got the hamlet of Cicero, but that's not really dense urban development. So nothing exists now. And what they're, you know, the pitch from the consultants to the towns is, well, you got to change your land use zoning so that more density can be built along the corridor. And now you're getting into, you know, local land use controls and what the preferences of the community.
I'm just going to go to one final thought. There is a local government's chapter in the scoping plan. So the strategy highlights for the local government's chapter is to develop local energy policies, provide clean energy siting support for local governments, promote municipal leadership to support clean energy adoption, and provide state support and guidance. So I would like to just kind of end on some final thoughts in terms of like what support from the state has your local municipalities, have they received that's worked, or what additional, besides funding, because we know that's an answer, but besides funding, what additional support could the state provide in this whole, you know, transition period that we're working through?
Well, I think the state has been looking at additional nuclear plants. And as you know, Oswego, we already have 3 of them up there, and we have 1,500 acres to take more. And that is actually your cleanest energy you're going to have. So that's one thing that I know that we've been working with.
I think if the state could provide a roadmap for how these different programs work together, I know that there's crosswalks between CEC and CSC, but I still feel that that offers money and projects without a lot of direction, and I feel that sometimes that can make it difficult to implement over the long term because you might not know that a project was implemented and then you go to apply. I just feel that even though every city and municipality is different, it's still a general formula of how you transition to clean energy, so understanding how that system works and how the system changes would be helpful to use the tools provided.
Yeah, thanks for that. So just building on that, so a roadmap, what would that look like? Like sector by sector, or kind of like here's where you should start and across the board?
I would say blending on how the sectors work together. So to the point of urban forestry, I think many municipalities, at least in the city of Syracuse, we already have urban forestry. So to build off of success for that, and then understanding how does the upgrade of electricity for energies also translate to transportation. You have to understand your grid infrastructure with the capacity in your building, so you can't go put an electric charger in that area if you haven't already done the building upgrades for that area. So just understanding, hey, what's the first step I should take here, what's the second step I should take there, and then how does that build to even generating revenue to pursue some of these other projects.
Any other final thoughts?
So what happens with this input?
So, next steps, you read my mind. So, there is a survey if you want to provide additional direct feedback. This goes right to the DEC. We have sent it around in email to our municipal contact list, but we can follow up with this group and send this around to you as well. Or send an email directly to the Climate Change at DEC email address. If you want to read the scoping plan, there's a link to it that we will share. and additional information about the climate pollution reduction grant program. There's just final resources here that the DEC has provided, including kind of like a general climate change webpage that has a lot of fact sheets and resources, and again, a link directly to the scoping plan if you want to read that in some detail. So basically what I'm going to do with your information, I've had some help taking notes, and I will write up a report to the DEC at this point, giving them the feedback that you've all provided today as a direct report. They are going to incorporate that feedback into the final version of the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, and hopefully that will eventually result in some additional programs and resources, like you're talking about, Karina, that we can share with all of you and the communities that you work with. Good. Thank you all for your input today.
Into the director's report. I just have a couple comments, I guess. I'm sure we'll all continue to follow the news relative to Micron, and I'm certainly reading what you're reading. Julie, you're a lot closer to it than me. You're spending money over there left and right like crazy to get the infrastructure all in place, but obviously all indications are that project is proceeding full speed ahead, and I'm sure the county is doing their part.
It's on a daily basis I get asked, and I'm like, you know what, it's kind of insulting and patronizing at this point. It's happening. So, yes, and we've slowed some stuff down. Stuff comes rapid fire. I chair environmental protection, so all the infrastructure, sewer, everything comes, and we've had to slow a couple of things down, right, Dave? Like seeker things and 415 pages being dropped on a Friday, and can you call a special meeting? And I think we're doing a really good job of what we support, but we've got to put our names on this, and 10, 15 years from now, we want to make sure it's all right and good.
A little bit of time.
You know what I mean?
So I just think, just to affirm what we're all reading, certainly as Julie just says, the county couldn't be more engaged, but all the counties, certainly Oswego County, is very much engaged. Now you can talk about that. Maybe they're looking at a major sewer trunk line across the southern area of Oswego County, which would be very exciting, innovative, and would tie directly into the Micron project. I know in working with my colleagues across the region, all 5 counties, in terms of economic development, the supply chain that we're all anticipating, right, that's going to follow Micron to the community. New development parks are being considered, publicly sponsored business parks. I know there's a lot of activity in the private sector as well. But certainly each of the county IDAs and development agencies is looking at the opportunities to develop well thought out, well placed, well located business parks across the region to capitalize on this opportunity. So that's certainly going forward. And I know the state has their own whole process going on for major transportation improvements that tie into the Micron project. So we sort of have parallel projects going on, and it can get a little confusing if you try to follow it in the media, but you got the whole Micron initiative and that environmental review. And now the state is going forward, because they're talking about new interchanges on Route 81, new interchange off of 481, a whole lot of improvements. So they're having to do their own seeker environmental review process sort of simultaneously. So it's a little bit challenging to keep track of those initiatives, but it's full speed ahead for sure. If you happen to have a chance to be out in the Syracuse lakefront area, you see a building going up. It's the Syracuse Aquarium. We've all heard about it. We've all talked about it. And she's on the...
And you, we're both on.
She's on the point on a number of these, but the $100 million Syracuse Aquarium is well under construction at this point, and I think they're looking to July 2026 for completion. So from my 2 cents, those of you who go way back with me with the Regional Planning Board, I've always been a big advocate. I think it could be a great project for our community and for our region, and we got to start building public support
Yeah.
and public excitement for the project.
There are things that, you know, and I was a journalist, as you know, and you always hear negative. This project is beyond just an aquarium. When you look at the third floor event space, it's unbelievable. There's like a tube of fish. It will be like, it's an aquarium, it's, you know, the aquarium's upstairs where you can have weddings, where you can have conferences, you know, when we, no different than any time we're luring people here, that's another space that's going to generate sales tax revenue and obviously help the communities. It's the same way, you might not think about this, but there are production companies that are going to come in and they'll be filming and creating series off of the different exhibits. So there's another revenue generating piece to that. So it's just a lot more than people just think, oh, you're going to go in and buy a ticket. It's really thoughtful what's happening, from my opinion. And that's why I want to be involved, because I put my name on this and I'm not, it's going to be a success. So.
You know, good for Syracuse, good for Onondaga County, but I think another great asset for the region when you think about tourism for the region is a collection of resources, and now we're adding another major resource.
They're voting to hire an actual fundraiser this week. I can't attend, I don't know if you can, but there's a couple of discussions happening because there's no appetite at the legislature to put any public funds towards it, and we're on the foundation board, so fundraising's where it's at. I can tell you, I've had 2 people in my district. You don't hear about this stuff, but it happens. Seahorses is what they want. They don't have children. They're going to donate to that. And I have another constituent, a family of mine that is looking to give another significant donation anonymously for the exhibit they would like to see from their childhood. So you hear a lot of negative. On the opposite side of that, there is a lot of support. I do know that sitting in my seat. So.
And last but not least, it's not all great news, but as you know, we've been trying to put together our Central New York broadband project. This is just 2 steps forwards, 1 step back, sideways. The dance continues with the state. We're not out of the woods with them yet, but we're trying as hard as we can with some key legislators helping us. But the state, this is no surprise to anybody in this room, they are proving to be very challenging to work with. And we're sort of sliding over into the unreasonable territory at this point. But we're trying to sort it out. Stay tuned. I may have more to report at the next board meeting. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, on that, anything else for new or old business? Otherwise, we'll entertain a motion to disperse. Second? Second. Thank you all for coming today. Safe travels.